Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I am your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back. My name is Nikki, and I am your puzzle master for this episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. Last week we spoke about dreaded meltdowns and what to do when they happen. This week I am so excited, though. We have our very first guest speaker, Brenda Del Monte. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
I am so excited. Just so I can give you a little bit of background about Brenda, Brenda is the author of a new book called I See You in There. She has over 20 years of speech language pathology experience. She works exclusively with those who are not functionally verbal and therefore need alternative means to communicate. She helps people acquire technology that helps them to communicate on a different level, and she has been a guest lecturer for the University of Washington, Central Washington University, Northern Arizona University, Arizona State University, and Midwestern University. Brenda recently, like I said, published her book, I See You in There, where she shares stories about wonderful families that she's met along her professional journey. And again, I am so excited to have her. Brenda, again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So let me ask you, we'll just kind of jump right into it. Tell me, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, what you may not know is that speech pathologists actually have very little training on working with children who aren't functionally verbal. So it's really common to have like a 6-week grad class that's supposed to tell you all the things, and it never does. And in the field of technology, my class on that was, in 2002. So the iPad wasn't even what it is today. So even if you did have a class on it, it doesn't teach you what you need to know. So all of what I have learned has been on the job, and mostly through error, honestly. I learned by messing up and then doing it right, and just being okay with doing it wrong the first time. So I just thought, I have learned so much from the families that I've served, and I just want to write down some of these stories. And at first I thought, oh, my kids will find this in my nightstand when I die. And then I ended up sharing some stories and taking a written story here and sending it to somebody because it was relevant to what was going on or this or that. And then it was like, you should publish this. So, and then it all kind of fell together. So that's how you kind of know you're supposed to do it, right?
Right, exactly. And it's not just kids on the spectrum that you help, but all special needs kids. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work with those who need to use some kind of augmentative communication to assist with communication. Now, that can be someone who has paralyzed vocal folds and can't make a noise even to cry or to laugh, all the way up to they're pretty functionally verbal unless their sensory system is out of whack and they're really feeling anxious or nervous, and then they really can't find their words and they need another way. So the physical abilities are every kind of neurological arrangement you can dream of.
Wow. So you really have to think kind of outside the box, too, because we're talking about different types of language, right? This
Right.
isn't just speech,
Right.
but how even formulating their own language, would you say that that's kind of
For sure.
inventing their own way to speak?
Absolutely. And, most of behavior is communication in some way. So recognizing those pieces as well, and letting them, celebrating who they are, what they bring to the table. I mean, one of my big beliefs is that every person is here on purpose and for a purpose. And it's really just a privilege to be a person that can hope to unlock a way for us to learn about everyone, even those that aren't able to tell us everything.
Wow. That's extraordinary. So what do you feel has been one of the most important lessons that you've learned over the years? I mean, this is it's so impressive, everything that you've done. I mean, I'm sure there's more than one life lesson that you've probably taken from this, but is there the one that really stands out to you?
I think just professionally, what I realized as I write medical letters of justification to acquire a communication device, right? And what I'm required to write for the medical field is that, how it meets their medical need. And so what I believe is that human connection is the medical necessity here.
Right.
And that every person needs to have a way to communicate, and they have the right to they're not communicating because they have no way.
Right.
Right?
Which is probably so difficult because that to me that would seem kind of removed from what you have to write.
Yes.
But it's such an important part too.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all play the game, right? I mean, we all do it with our own medical needs. Like, wait, when is my deductible done? And, we all play the medical game.
Yeah.
But I think what I realized is that it's not about getting 8 out of 10 on an IEP goal. It's not about telling him to find something on the device and him touching the button I wanted him to touch. None of that. All of that's what we take data on, and none of that's human connection.
Right. And
we need to be coming at this from another angle and recognizing that I want to know the person inside. I mean, when I interview parents for these evaluations, probably there's 2 things they say the most. One is, I want to know what happens to them when I'm not with them. Mm-hmm. And they can't answer all of my questions. Yeah. And that's scary.
Right.
And I want to be part of that solution. The other thing that parents say is they're in there, mm-hmm. which is why I ended up naming the book what I named, because parents also know from all of the little undescribable, undata-taking things mm-hmm. that this person has preferences and likes and dislikes and passions and questions and all kinds of deep ideas that we have to figure out a way that they can access their language right. and express themselves.
Right. And I'm sure, and I can only speak from my parent perspective, that's a very lost feeling because you don't know exactly where to start,
right.
what resources to look for.
Right.
And so you do look to your providers to try to guide you down that path of how can we access them, because we do see that potential in them.
Right.
It's not something for me personally that I've even had a hard time describing to other people.
Yeah.
Because you go back to the medical side of it and they want to look at data.
Yeah.
Which is so, in my opinion, has always been so inaccurate because that's not who Drayson is. That's right. not, there's so much more to him than just what you see on paper.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And in fact, one of the chapters is a diagnosis and prognosis. And the benefits of getting a diagnosis is that it explains something.
There's an answer.
Right. Yeah. Sort of. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
Because
the answer, the start of the beginning of what you don't know is going to happen. Yeah.
Because the reality is everybody with the same diagnosis has its different neurological makeup and different personality and is a different, it's a fingerprint, right? It's right. like, it's unique. So there's a comfort in an answer of a diagnosis, but you're also confined then to work within, this is what we do for that diagnosis. This is what we expect to happen regarding prognosis. And we just don't know that.
Right.
And I really want parents to engage in hope. I really want parents to continue to pursue ways to communicate with their children because it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know we've had kind of a back conversation when we spoke even several weeks back mm-hmm. about my very first podcast episode was It Starts With Believing. And that's right. kind of what your book is about too, is just creating belief. And so I think that's why I immediately was like, oh, I have to have Brenda on this show.
Yeah.
because I felt like you were speaking my language. I mean, from a parent perspective, I think identifying and finding someone that you have that synergy with is so, so important.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to parents in terms of finding that person, finding those providers that are going to be just as hopeful as they are and have the belief in their child?
Yeah.
Because I think one thing me personally that I've struggled with, and again, I can only speak from my experience, is that I want to find that team of people that are going to believe in Drayson just as much as I believe in him. So do you have any, golden nuggets or advice that you would give to parents?
Right. Well, I have a couple of stories, but one is that I feel like finding a therapist that is believes that your child has that potential, even if they don't have the answers. And honestly, it's almost a better sign of an honest relationship with your therapist if they say, I don't know about it, but I'm working on it. I'm learning it. And that can be a red flag for some parents, like, oh no, I want an expert. But honestly, people who are walking through learning more as we learn more, particularly about this diagnosis. I think those that have been diagnosed with autism, we're at the infancy phase about what this even is and how this manifests itself and what is the best approach and why we even value neurotypical over neurodiversity, right? So, I mean, there's so much that we still need to grow in this area. So I feel like finding someone who says, I believe that they're in there and we're going to keep trying. And then I also have the flip side is I know that I've had parents say that like their worst day is the day of the IEP. Yeah. And as a therapist, that makes me so sad. As a person sitting on their couch, I'm so privileged to hear this information.
Yeah.
And I absolutely don't defend them because I've got to tell you, it's not our favorite day either.
Right.
And I feel like that you can scan the room and see the one who talks about your child like the person you know. Mm-hmm. And that might be the one you need to pick off.
That's good
because
advice.
the team is going to follow somebody. Mm-hmm. And if nobody's picked out, then it just kind of goes along autopilot.
Right.
And year after year, we carry over goals, and year after year, we don't see the change we're hoping for. But when you pick off somebody who's saying, well, I just know that she loves trolls, and anything Poppy's going to make her want to work hard for me. And so we do a lot of that. And you go, that's my girl.
Right.
Right? So that's somebody who sees your child for who she is.
Right.
Not who you hope she's going to become. Right. In a year from now in some magical, special way.
Or having the focus on what they can't do, I'm assuming, too.
Absolutely.
Because that has happened to me in an IEP. The focus is on what Drayson can't do, not on his likes or dislikes or what he can do and how to build off of that.
Right.
So that's interesting.
And, I think the pandemic highlighted this extremely well. For better or for worse, but I hope it ends up being for better. And that is that, schools went online, and I would ask, I'm a home-based person, so I would say, well, who's your speech therapist in your school? And they would say, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are people that we are hoping can help your child communicate, and we don't know each other's names.
Right.
Remember the pandemic 2020 was March. If you hadn't had your IEP yet, you might not have even met that person yet,
right.
And so it's like, what is wrong with this picture?
And we're talking about communication.
Exactly. The fact that we're trying to measure communication at all is a little bit ridiculous. But definitely the pandemic was like, you know what? And on the flip side, too, I do a lot of speaking at out of Special Ed Technology Center, which is out of Central Washington University, where schools will call and say, hey, we have a case, we need some help. And their side of it is also that. honestly, it's like, we don't know this family. You know, the bus brings them, the bus takes them home. We'll meet them once a year. We have to figure out how to work more collaboratively because no one is an expert on your child but you.
Right. We see it the most closely.
Yeah.
We're with them all the time. We're even in intuitive sense. I feel like I have more of an intuition on what Drayson needs and wants. That's just, I think, my parental response. And now that I think about it, I don't know if I've always translated that to people that are helping unless I'm being asked.
Right.
That's interesting because I would think then that tells me that maybe my emotional response is also inhibiting. Maybe that's fair to say of how I'm communicating to his providers. I just had an epiphany moment, folks.
But you speak Drayson, is what you're
I
saying.
do.
You speak Drayson.
I have, yeah.
And you know why? Because that's what good moms do. I mean, that's what parents do. We speak our child's language in all kinds of ways, right? In all kinds of intuition, and all kinds of past experiences, and your whole life with Drayson means you speak Drayson.
Right.
Your fear is, but nobody else speaks Drayson.
Right.
And what happens when he's not with me?
Right.
You know, and that's where it's like, right, how do we translate that person to all those that he's around?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said to Drayson, the moment he was born and put into my arms, before I even knew he was on the spectrum, I remember telling him that he was meant for greatness. And I've continued to say that throughout the years to people that in my eyes, he's meant for greatness in some way, shape, or form. It might not be the traditional.
Yeah.
You know, he might not become the quarterback of, University of Arizona or anything like that, but he's meant to do something great. And I think that has what's carried me to help him get the services that he needs. What advice, I shouldn't say what advice, what do you hope that this book will do for the special needs community?
I hope that it was my fear that I wouldn't accurately represent families because I do not have a child with a disability. So my hope was that parents would feel like that they were heard. The families that I listened to would feel heard. Other families that I didn't listen to that read the book feel seen. And that those serving this community would see them for the value that they are in this process, regardless of what, doctor, special ed teacher, therapist, whatever angle you're coming from, that you stop and recognize the parent's contribution is vital.
Right. And to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. I have the book here. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see that it's called I See You in There. I'm going to read an excerpt from it, if it's okay. My biggest takeaways about this book was that we all have a purpose, and to hold the belief that your child is capable of so much more than beyond just what you're told within a diagnosis. It's an art and a science, I believe. And I'm coming to realize that more and more, even in my talks with you, Brenda, that it's not just science-based or medical-based, but there's an art form to this. At the end of every episode, we do like to read a story. So for today, I am going to read an excerpt from I See You in There that was very profound to me. And you were so worried about conveying your message to parents, and I have to speak from the parent side. You hit the nail on the head for me. So it was, I'm going to read this passage today that Brenda wrote in her book that was extremely profound for me, and that's why I wanted to share it with all of you. But if you do have a story to share, please send an email over to me at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. I would love to read a story about your child, celebrating the wins, celebrating maybe a mini triumph you've had that we can go ahead and feature on one of the upcoming podcasts. Let me I'm going to put on my glasses here. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, so there is an excerpt in the book here towards the end, and I highly recommend, like I say, that you pick this book up because it was hugely inspirational for me. But it's called I See You Parents. None of us choose the landscape in which we are planted in. If you find yourself on an ocean-battered cliff, your only choice is to grow there or fall into the ocean and die. So if we transplant a survivor from a steep hill or a cliff to an open field, natives of the field may look at the surviving yet crooked tree and wonder, why does she have so much trouble trusting people and systems? Most parents of children with disabilities do not choose the rough terrain of disability, unless you are a foster parent seeking out those dear ones that need the care. But the open field of education and even hospital systems were not made for the chronically ill, physically impaired, and cognitively challenged children. Why don't they trust people? Doing everything for their child is what it takes to survive on the cliffside where the seizures are constant or too long, the NG tube is pulled out, or the suction machine for the trach isn't working and your child is unable to breathe. The tree has fought wind, gravity, and erosion and grew strong and green on a steep cliff anyway. This tree will look strange and out of place when moved to the open field. The gnarled, wind-blown tree from an oceanside cliff might not conform with our ideas of what a tree should look like. The oceanside tree, being the parent or the student, might not conform to what a tree should look like, but rather needs accommodations someone native to the open field has never had to think about. This can be very apparent in an IEP meeting or in a post-surgical stay in the hospital. Those in the IEP meeting have genuine best intentions to help this crooked gnarled tree grow in an open field. Perhaps the best way to do Perhaps the best way to do that would be to ask the battered tree, what do you need to grow? Or how does your child communicate with you? Or how does your child get around the house? If the answer is with squeals when she likes something and frowns when she doesn't like something, then the team responds with, that's good to know. We weren't sure if the squeals were joy or distress. If the answer is, he commando crawls on his elbows dragging his lower body, then the team can respond, then we better arrange the classroom so he has room to move. Sorry, I'm trying not to cry, folks. Likewise, at the hospital, the staff is focused on the hip surgery, the G tube surgery, the VNS implant, and the post-care for that particular body or part or procedure. However, how does your child respond to anesthesia might be a question that would help to better prepare the nurses. When the parent responds with increased seizure activity and cyclical vomiting, all of which might be unusual responses to surgery for the average child and would not better equip staff to support this gnarled tree on a terrain not made for them. Parents don't get any sleep in the hospital post-surgery because not all nurses know how to handle cyclical vomiting, increased seizure activity, etc. Why don't they trust the nurses or the system? Because they are the ones made to fight for the survival of their child and grew to know what it takes to do so. Every person at the IEP table and every nurse on the surgical floor has the best intentions, but most grew up in an open field and most wouldn't survive should they get transplanted to the side of the cliff hanging over the ocean. I think that's beautiful, Brenda. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for being on the show today. And any last words of wisdom that you would like to give to parents?
Well, that analogy started from the book Burnout.
Oh,
so
yes.
That's an eye-opener. And I, like most things when I'm reading, I'm looking at it from my lens, which is this world. And so as she was talking about, the gnarled tree, I was like, oh, this is it. This is what this feels like. And so I do want to give credit for that. But I recently have been reading Atlas of the Heart from Brene Brown.
Yes, love her.
And there's a section on awe and wonder. And it talks about, I don't know if I can read a little part of it or not, or do you not want me to do more time on it?
No, if you have it, do you have it available?
Okay, yeah.
Let's read it quickly. And while she's pulling that up, because I really do want to convey a lot of what Brenda is the messaging that Brenda is delivering to you today. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please spread the word to others that might need help with a special needs child or a kid on the spectrum. Also, don't forget to send in those stories to us at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. Like I said, I really want to start featuring more people to read stories about. Did you find it?
I don't know if I can find it. Okay. You guys will have to grab the book maybe and read the section. But she talks about setting that awe is the kind of I think wonder is the permission to continue to learn. I wonder if this, I wonder if that, and we have to stay wondering. We do not have this solved, any of this, right? So we have to stay with the wonder. But as we take risks with our wonder, I wonder if this will work. I wonder if they will respond to this. I wonder if this is motivating enough for them to do a hard thing. And try it, then you step back and the result is awe, because the phenomenon is the person gets to shine. And I realized that I don't want to be a speech language pathologist. I want to be an awe and wonderist because I want to be somebody who continues to question all that there is, all the systems, all the limitations, all the barriers, all the things we don't know. I want to try things even at the risk of failure. And as a therapist, that's really hard to do. There's a lot of type A therapists out there that aren't comfortable with failing. I mean, a lot of people for that matter. And then giving time, presenting these kiddos with technology, and I don't take their hand and make them do things. I give them time to decide that they want to participate in this, and the phenomenon is shine and awe and wonder and all of it. So I guess I just feel very hopeful if we can stay in this mode of let's continue to question things. Let's build relationships between all the people that are taking care of each child. And that way we can set the stage for them to shine.
That's amazing. That is so awesome. Thank you so much, Brenda. I really greatly appreciate your time. This concludes our episode for today. If you like what you're hearing, like I said, please spread the word to others. Feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice. And until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, you don't have to have it solved in a day. Take care.